Hello, everybody, and welcome. My name is Brennan Liebert, and I am going to be your host for today. I am also the owner of Inception Canine Academy, and today we are going to be talking to you about dog cognition and how it applies to training. So I've built this little slide for you guys so that way you can kind of take a look and follow along with me. And with that being said, we're going to go right on into it. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is the 9 different personality profiles. So science has been able to show and prove to us that dogs have 9 different personality profiles, or at least within the dog world, I should say, when it comes to personalities, that there's 9 different personalities. So you have the ace, the charmer, the socialite, the expert, Renaissance dog, proto dog, Einstein, Maverick, and the Stargazer. All right, so as you can see by looking at this, there are many differences between all the different profiles. And as you can see, for instance, we'll go ahead and go with Ace, the very first one, is a problem solver and is bonded. And that's about 10% of dogs, okay? And then if you look at Charmer, Charmer is also bonded, but they're also attentive, and that it makes up for about 16% of dogs. And as you can see, it just keeps on going, so on and so forth. And that way it gets you to understand and realize that the percentages of these dogs are very small. And so therefore, when you are working with your dog, or if you are a trainer that is working with dogs, that these different personality profiles are going to come up a lot in your training sessions, and it might shed some light on why your dog acts and does the way, or does things the way that they do when it comes to dog training. So now that we're able to go over that and see what the different 9 personality profiles are, we're going to go into the next part, which is what makes up, or how are those profiles measured. So the way that science has done it is that they've taken a series of different tests and they applied them into different groups. So the first set of groups are the social problem solving and the independent problem solving. So with the social problem solving, it's broken up into 3 other categories, which are empathy, communication, and cunning, as to where the independent problem solving is only broken up into 2 parts, which are memory and reasoning. Okay, so now that we know that, we are going to go into the next part on the social problem solving. So with the social problem solving, as you can see, the very first tests that are conducted are for empathy. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to see, how does the dog read and respond to the emotions of others? And when they're doing this, they want to know, is the dog more individualistic, or is the dog more bonded when it comes to this part of their cognition? The second part that they go into is communication. So how is the dog using the information from others to avoid detection? So what this means is, or what they're looking for, is how is the dog during communication in this part of testing? Is it going to be more self-reliant on its own communication and being able to communicate? Or is it going to be collaborative, and is it going to be using multiple different, people or dogs to be able to communicate better in this set of tests? Okay, so the next part that we're going to go into is cunning. Is the dog using the information from others to learn about the environment? So what we mean by that is, the dog going to be trustworthy when it comes to this part of the testing, or is the dog going to be a little bit more wily and a little bit more rebellious when it comes to this part of the testing? So those are the things that they're trying to figure out when it comes to social problem solving. So the next part that it goes into is the independent problem solving. So with the independent problem solving, like I said earlier, we're going over memory and reasoning. So the first one is going to be memory and storing past experiences to make future choices. So when it comes to these tests and doing multiples of these tests, is the dog being present-minded and using its own brain to be able to figure out each part of the test, or is it going to be more retrospective and it's going to use its past experiences to make the decisions on the next test and the next test and the next test? So those are the things that they're looking for as far as memory. How well is the dog's memory? And then the last set of tests are going to be on reasoning. So how is the dog inferring the solution to new problems? So is the dog going to be more impulsive and just kind of dive right in when it comes to training or in his cognition? Or is the dog going to be more logical when it comes to certain situations and being able to problem solve? So those are the different tests that they're doing and that they're trying to look for, and that's how they came up with the 9 different personality profiles. Okay, so how does that apply to training? So before we delve really deep into that part of the training, we're going to go over some of the other things that we should probably know and understand for training. So if you are a trainer or maybe need a little bit of refresher, we're going to be going over the different operant conditioning and classical conditioning. And later on, we're going to go into some other stuff. So if you are a pet parent who has never heard of these types of things, we're going to delve into them just a little bit so that way you can realize and understand what it is that we're going to be talking about a little bit later on when it comes to training. So the first part is the learning theory that I just talked about, which is operant conditioning and classical conditioning. So operant conditioning is the concept that was developed by B.F. Skinner, and Skinner introduced the concept of reinforcement, and that a behavior that is reinforced increases in frequency, while a behavior that is not decreases. So that is operant conditioning. The next part is going into classical conditioning. So the person that came up with this was Pavlov, and I'm sure many of you that are out there know Pavlov's theory, the ringing of the bell. But if you don't understand or don't know about Pavlov's theory, I'll explain it a little bit more, and that is classical conditioning. So, in classical conditioning, an unconditional stimulus produces an unconditional response, and a conditioned stimulus produces a conditioned response. Okay, so that is operant and classical conditioning. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the next part in how the different types of conditioning apply. So the next part that we're going to go into is positive reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. So the first one that we're going to go into is positive reinforcement. So before I go into that, yet again, if you're a trainer, you should already know this. Pet parents, if you don't know this, here are your examples. But on the positives and negatives, whenever I talk about those, whenever you hear positive, whether it's positive reinforcement or positive punishment, that means that we're adding something to the equation. If you hear anything about negative reinforcement or negative punishment, that means we're taking something out of the equation. Okay, so we're going to go into the first one, which is positive reinforcement, and it is the addition of something that is likely to increase a desired behavior. A great example of that is when your dog goes into a sit position and you give it a treat. So you're adding the treat to reinforce the behavior. On negative reinforcement, it is the removal of something that will increase a desired behavior. So a great example of that is putting on your seatbelt, right? So you hop in the vehicle, you start taking off down the road, and then you hear that bing, 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 and that is your vehicle letting you know that you need to put on your seatbelt. So in order to get rid of that noise, you need to buckle up your seatbelt. So that is what they are trying to do. They are using something as far as a noise to make it annoying to you, and that way it'll force you to kind of put on your seatbelt. And then once you put on your seatbelt, which is the desired behavior, then the noise will go away. That is the negative part. So that is negative reinforcement. So positive punishment is the addition of something that will lessen an undesired behavior. So for instance, if you have a dog and let's say you're using a shock collar because it's barking and you want to get rid of the barking, what you are doing is you're adding the shock to when the dog barks, which is the undesired behavior. So every time that the dog barks, you give the shock, and that is your positive punishment because you're adding. Now, with negative punishment, it is the removal of something that will decrease a behavior. So a great example of that is, let's say you come in the door and your dog's over there jumping, jumping, jumping. It's happy to see you, it's happy to see you, and it's just going up crazy. And so instead of saying no or anything like that, you just take yourself and you turn yourself to face away from them. So when you do that and you turn yourself and you face away from them, you are removing yourself from the equation. You're removing your sight and your attention to the dog. And that is going to relate to the dog that whenever he jumps or does anything like that, every time he does it, I turn around, and once he stops, then I will give him attention. So, but the turning and facing the opposite direction is your negative punishment because we're taking ourselves out of the equation. All right, so hopefully that helps you guys to understand and realize a little bit about conditioning and reinforcements and punishment. So now, yet again, that we have learned all those things, the next part is that we're going to go into are the 9 different personality profiles. So now that we have kind of covered a little bit of this stuff, it might get you to, or help you to understand how this applies to the 9 different personality profiles. So yet again, as you look, they are very different from one another. And so we're going to take a couple of those personality profiles and we are going to compare them. So we are going to compare the socialite and the stargazer. So as you can see, the socialite relies less on independent problem-solving skills more than other dogs, and then it also relies in humans in their pack to get what they want. So as you can see, this dog is going to be very attentive. It's going to be very responsive because it's looking to its human for all the answers. It looks for others for answers or help or anything like that. So this is the type of dog that is going to be very easy to train because you can use your body language and you can use treats and everything like that to be able to get them to do the things that you want them to do. Now, on the other hand, when you look at the stargazer, it utilizes self-reliant and present-minded strategies. So it also has a wolf-like side and it is very individualistic in its lifestyle. And so when it comes to those types of personality traits, it makes it a little bit harder for them to be able to be in a social setting as well as for their owners. Their owners are going to have an extremely hard time trying to train these dogs because you might get, so far with treats in the beginning stages, but once you take those treats out, boom, it's going to go back to its individual personality and it's not going to care about you. It's not going to care about what you have to offer because the treat is now out of the equation. So now we're going to have to do things a little bit differently. So with that being said, how does that play into training? So yet again, if we go back to the socialite and the stargazer, like I said, this dog is going to be very, very easy to train as to where this one is not going to be very easy to train. So that is where all of your operant conditioning, your classical conditioning, your positive reinforcements, your negative reinforcements, your positive punishments, your negative punishments, all these things are going to come into play with your training. And this is where it is good to know these types of things and to realize these types of things when you are going into your training and into your training sessions, because this will help you out significantly on how to be able to understand your dog and to be able to train them. So for instance, if you're a pet parent that is watching this video right now and you go online and you are watching a video, okay, and you're watching this video and you're just like, yeah, this is great, this is really cool, I'm gonna do that with my dog, and you go out there and you start doing it with your dog and you're not quite yielding the same results as the video, or you might be coming up with issues that never occurred in the other video or in that video. And the reason being is because your dog's personality profile may be different from that of the personality profile of the dog that's in the video. So you don't really want to compare too much when it comes to watching a video online and trying to do it on your own, because you're more than likely you're going to run into different scenarios and different situations. I'm not saying not to watch them or anything like that or get some great ideas, but just remember in the back of your mind that when it comes to these types of things, you're going to have to use all those other skills that I had talked about, the conditionings, reinforcements, and punishments, to be able to get the dog to better understand what it is that you want. And the same thing goes if you're a pet parent and you are looking for a dog trainer for your dog. So you want to make sure that your dog trainer uses many different methods and uses many different ways to be able to train. Because yet again, if let's say for instance in my class, right, if I have 5 different dogs in a class, what I may be doing for dog number 1 is not going to be the same that I'm doing for dog number 2. Yeah, they're in the same exact class and they're taking the same exact commands and they're learning the same exact things in that class, but what I'm doing with this dog, I have to do probably different with this dog just because they have difference in their personalities. And so you want a trainer that can realize that, notice it, understand it, and be able to apply the conditionings and reinforcements and punishments that need to be done for dog number 1 or dog number 2 or both. So it's all going to depend on that personality profile. Also, for you trainers that are out there, same thing that I just talked about. You want to make sure that you know different methods and that you know different ways of training, because if you only stick to one particular method, as you can see from the example that I gave to you a little bit earlier, that it probably is not going to work for some of those dogs that you're training. So let's say, for instance, you are a purely positive trainer. Yeah, you're going to get some results from the training and what you're doing, but when it comes to the stargazer, for instance, and you have a client that has a stargazer dog, you're going to have to use different methods and different ways of training other than purely positive reinforcement, because that dog does not learn the same exact way as like the socialite will. So you're going to see great success with a socialite dog, but you're not going to see as much success with a stargazer if you're not using and applying the conditionings, reinforcements, and punishments when it comes to that. So, with that being said, I hope that this helps you guys out in being able to understand dogs a little bit more, how they think, and how training, the operant conditioning, classical conditioning, the different reinforcements, and the different punishments work in those personality profiles to help you to get better results, faster results, and not only that, creating great bonds with your dog. Because when your dog is able to understand what it is that you're teaching them and you're giving them great communication by utilizing these tools or these methods in your training, the better off you and your dog are going to be on your relationship. So, yet again, I hope this helps you guys out. My name is Brandon Liebert with Inception Canine Academy. I hope you guys have a good day, and we look forward to you guys watching our next video. Bye-bye.